Hello, you're listening to Rot-Weiss-Rot REPORT, a podcast for those who live and work in Austria. Each week, we cover the main events and news, brief and clear, so you stay informed about important changes that affect your work, documents, and daily life. In today's episode, Austrian cities and villages are rapidly running out of money. Which city has been declared the country's biggest debtor? The European Union has officially banned employers from asking candidates about their previous salary during job interviews. We'll explain how this decision protects migrants' rights. Austria plans to introduce a new tax on online parcels, which has already sparked fierce criticism. What will you have to pay for, and how much? The Employment Service, AMS, and the Tax Office have completed major audits, so we'll tell you what could result in fines. Plus, this episode is packed with useful information for life in the country, news from the capital and the regions. Let's dive into the main events of the past week.
So, Austrian manufacturers may come to a standstill due to strikes. Trade unions and owners of major companies have been unable to agree on wage levels for 2 months now. The cause is the annual spring negotiations, officially called the Spring Wage Round, Frühjahrslohnrunde in Austria. At these meetings, business representatives and workers approve new tariff rates for the coming year every year. In most major economic sectors, such as construction, railways, and the textile industry, negotiations were successful, and workers received tariff rate increases averaging 3%. However, the chemical, electrical engineering, and paper industries have been unable to reach an agreement with business for 9 weeks. The main dispute centers on the official rolling inflation, Rollierende inflation, indicator, the average inflation rate over the past 12 months, which is currently slightly above 3%. The Production Workers Union, Produktionsgewerkschaft, one of the largest organizations in the country defending the rights of manual workers, demands a rate increase of 3.5% so that people's incomes can keep up with rising prices in stores. However, employers are offering significantly less. In the electrical engineering sector, they're willing to add just 1%, while in the chemical industry, they're refusing to change the base salary at all and are only proposing to pay workers a one-time compensation of €250. The trade unions don't agree to these terms, and workers at some factories have decided to stage the first warning strikes by the end of May. Heads of major enterprises emphasize that industry is currently in crisis due to unstable gas and electricity prices. The chairman of the Chemical Industry Employers Association, Ernst Gruber, cites neighboring Germany as an example. There, trade unions agreed to a zero-wage round, Null-Lohnrunde, meaning workers voluntarily refused wage increases so that factories wouldn't close and they wouldn't simply lose their jobs. Germany, as is known, is the main market for goods from Austria, so if labor costs in Austria rise, local goods will become more expensive than German ones. This would lead to lost orders and layoffs. That's how the situation looks from a business perspective. But the trade unions respond that large corporations actually have stable profits and should share them with workers. What happens if the parties can't reach an agreement? If businesses don't raise base rates to a sufficient level, factories across the country will likely shut down at the end of May due to a nationwide strike. Overall, more than 130,000 people currently work in these sectors, including many migrants. It's important for foreign workers to know that participating in an official strike coordinated by a trade union is completely legal. You cannot be fired for this, and strike days don't cancel your work visa or resident status in the country. Moreover, during an official strike, the union pays people monetary compensation from its own fund, called strike pay, Streikgeld, to compensate for lost wages on days when the factory isn't operating.
However, financial difficulties are forcing people to seek more stable earnings. Which brings us to the second main topic of the week. While industrial giants argue over money, the Austrian government has decided to radically change the rules for those working part-time. Social Policy Minister Corinna Schumann demands enshrining in law the right of workers to independently decide how many hours per week they want to work. Currently in Austria, more than 160,000 people are officially employed in so-called part-time work, Teilzeit. Partial employment, when a person doesn't work 40 hours a week, but, for example, 20 or 25. The new reform proposes introducing the right to increase working hours, Stundenaufstockung, the legal right to demand more hours. Simply put, if a person working half-time comes to an employer and says, "I want to work more and earn more," the company will be obliged to provide them with additional hours. Currently, everything is decided solely by the business owner, and if they refuse, the worker remains on minimum income. This initiative has met fierce resistance. The first to oppose it were heads of major medical and social organizations united in the IAFW Association. This includes giants like the Red Cross, Rotes Kreuz, and Caritas. They stated that this law would simply paralyze their work. They say that the entire social sector and medicine in Austria rely on strict shift planning. If every worker gets the legal right to chaotically demand more hours, or, conversely, switch to less employment at their own discretion, hospitals and nursing homes simply won't be able to create duty schedules. Therefore, employers see the situation as the government simply trying to score political points before elections while shifting the entire financial burden onto business. For foreign workers and migrants, this reform has great significance due to one hidden nuance. Most foreigners in Austria, especially women, work precisely on part-time, Teilzeit, for example, in cleaning, hospitality, or elderly care. Employers often deliberately keep foreigners on short shifts to pay less in taxes and not provide them with full social guarantees. The new law will allow migrants to legally demand more working hours. This will automatically increase their official income, which in Austria is the main condition for visa extension, obtaining a permanent residence permit, or Austrian citizenship. Currently, this reform is at the stage of a government bill, Gesetzesentwurf. This means the law hasn't been passed yet and is only going through the discussion stage. Moreover, discussions are being delayed due to resistance from medical companies and business associations, which we've already mentioned. According to optimistic forecasts, voting in the National Council, Nationalrat, will take place no earlier than autumn of this year. So even if deputies support the law, it won't come into force before January 1st, 2027. Therefore, it's too early to run to your employer and demand full-time now, but we advise you to carefully monitor this process and the news.
Another important news item from last week concerns road safety. Austria's statistics agency, Statistik Austria, and the Automobile Club, OAMTC, published data on traffic accidents from last year. And the figures are, to put it mildly, disappointing. 403 people died on Austrian roads, which is 15% more than in 2024. Over 47,000 people were injured, the highest toll since 2017. The most fatal accidents were recorded in Lower Austria and Upper Austria, the fewest in Vienna. Austrian traffic police and road safety experts also identified the safest time and day of the week, that is, the period when accidents occur most frequently. According to their data, the peak accident time starts at 4 p.m. and ends at 7 p.m. The reason is simple. People are returning home from work en masse. Drivers are tired, attention is scattered, and traffic jams form on the roads. The most dangerous day of the week is Friday. Statistically, it's precisely on Friday afternoon that traffic on Austrian highways becomes critical. Austrians call this the holiday escape, Feiertagsflucht, or weekend commuters, Wochenendependler, people traveling home to other federal states or abroad for the weekend. So if you're behind the wheel, be careful. And now let's turn to the main economic news of the past week.
So, Austria has released a new financial report on the life of cities and villages, called the Municipal Finance Report, Gemeindefinanzbericht, and its figures turned out to be alarming. The main fact is that local budgets are rapidly running out of money. Life in the country has become more expensive, so town halls have to pay significantly more for electricity, heating, or construction. At the same time, ordinary people have started economizing and buying less in stores due to the crisis, and because of this, local treasuries are receiving less in sales taxes. In Austria, it's precisely the local government, Gemeinde, that fully maintains kindergartens, repairs schools, and fixes roads. A lack of funds could impact residents' comfort. The main debtor among major cities was officially recognized as St. Pölten, the capital of Lower Austria. The net financial debt, Schuldenstand, here was recorded at 170 million euros. Due to this financial situation, the city leadership made a decision to launch a strict austerity program. In particular, the city government is temporarily freezing funding for some infrastructure projects. This decision drew criticism from the opposition Liberal Party, NEOS, which advocates for budget transparency. Representatives of this party are now demanding that the mayor's office publish a full report on exactly which facilities will be left without funding. The problem is that cities' expenses are growing much faster than their revenues. If tax revenues have only grown by 27% in recent years, expenses for municipal workers' salaries and goods procurement have jumped by 36% all at once. Only Upper Austria remains stable against this background. There, local authorities have prohibited municipalities from taking new loans and strictly controlled budget balance, so most cities and villages closed the year without a deficit. The crisis was commented on by the General Secretary of the Austrian Association of Cities, Thomas Wenninger. According to him, if the central government doesn't urgently change the tax distribution system in the country, local authorities will be forced to close social programs to avoid municipal bankruptcies. Residents of debt-ridden regions will feel the real consequences of this crisis through changes in local tariffs. When a municipality's budget runs a deficit, local authorities have the legal right to review the cost of utility services. For example, in the city of St. Pölten in 2026, fees for garbage collection, water supply, and sewerage were officially raised by 10%. For foreign workers and migrants in such problem regions, this means a direct increase in monthly housing costs, as amounts in utility bills will grow following City Hall decisions. Additionally, in Burgenland, local associations have already announced the need to review property tax Grundsteuer rates, which haven't changed in over 40 years, which will also increase the financial burden on tenants and homeowners.
Meanwhile, Austria's Ministry of Finance has officially submitted for consideration a law introducing a national parcel fee, Paketabgabe, of €2 for each delivered order. The law is planned to launch from the end of September this year. The tax applies to large online platforms with an annual turnover in Austria exceeding €100 million. For example, Amazon. But small Austrian businesses, KMU, Kleine und Mittlere Unternehmen, that sell their goods through these large marketplaces are also affected. Through this fee, the budget plans to receive about €280 million annually. The government will use this money to partially finance the reduction of value-added tax on basic food products. Currently, it's 10%, but the plan is to reduce the tax to 5%. However, critics of these innovations have emerged. The FPO Party and the Economic Chamber, Wirtschaftskammer Österreich, WKO, are outraged. They call this fee a penalty tax, Paketstrafsteuer, and a new inflation factor. Why are they outraged? First, deceiving buyers. Initially, the government stated that this fee was aimed exclusively at cheap Chinese platforms such as Temu and Shein. However, due to European Union legal restrictions, it was impossible to make a selective customs fee. As a result, the government made the tax general. It affected European and Austrian companies, for example, the large chains Otto and XXX Lutz. Second, shifting costs onto people. Large retailers have already officially stated that they will simply include this fee in the delivery cost or the product itself for the end buyer. The FPO notes that as a result, all the help from reducing food prices will be completely canceled out by this new online shopping tax, which will hit every family. Third, legal trickery. Companies Otto and XXX Lutz are already preparing lawsuits, claiming that the law violates the Austrian constitutional principle of equality in business, Gleichheitsgrundsatz. If you actively shop online on Amazon, Zalando, or other platforms, prepare for each parcel to become €2 more expensive from the end of September. Order 10 items a month. That's plus €20 to your budget. Over a year, that adds up to €240. And the savings from reducing VAT on products for an average family will be approximately €200 per year. The calculations are approximate, of course, but to put it simply, you'll save on bread and milk but lose on online shopping. At least that's how it looks right now. And remember the exceptions. For example, the €2 fee isn't charged if a company delivers goods with its own service rather than through the post office. That's it for business and economy. Up next, we'll talk about new rules for job interviews and other useful updates from the past week.
The Employment Service, AMS, and Austria's tax office have summarized the first results of a new reform. Recall that since January 1st, the rules have changed for those who combine social benefits with additional side jobs. Not everyone took these changes into account, and now workers across the country have started receiving official notifications about recalculation of their income, the need to return part of the benefits, or pay fines retroactively. So, what exactly is this about? Before the start of this reform in Austria, a popular financial model existed. A person could officially receive monthly unemployment benefits from AMS and at the same time legally have additional earnings on a part-time basis. This format is called marginal employment, geringfügige Beschäftigung, minimal employment. This refers to side jobs for a few hours a week, for example, cleaning, delivery, or kitchen work. As long as monthly earnings didn't exceed the state-set limit, the unemployed person kept both the benefit and income from the side job. Since January 1st, combining unemployment benefits with any official side job has been prohibited. If a person is registered with AMS as unemployed and takes on any work with minimal employment, benefit payments automatically stop. At the same time, for people who already have one permanent job and want to take an additional one in their free time, conditions have actually improved. If a person works full-time, contributions to the unemployment insurance fund are no longer taken from their second minimal contract. This means that net income from side jobs for such workers has become slightly higher. What do you need to know to avoid breaking the law? The state has set a clear maximum limit for minimal side jobs. This is €551.10 per month. The State Social Insurance Service, ÖGK, sees all of a person's active contracts in an electronic database. If you have various additional jobs, for example, cleaning in one place in the morning and delivering orders in another in the evening, and your total monthly income exceeds €551.10, the system will record multiple insurance, Mehrfachversicherung. At this point, the minimal employment status is cancelled, and the tax office issues a bill for independent payment of large taxes for all past months.
To avoid fines and returning social benefits, you should calculate your total income. We remind you once again that the total figure should not cross the limit of €551. Also, remember that every worker in Austria can monitor their insurance status through their personal account on the Meine SV portal. And the last thing worth doing is consulting with AMS before signing a contract. If you receive any payments from the employment service before signing a side job contract, be sure to inform your AMS advisor so you don't accidentally lose basic financial support. Meanwhile, from June 7, 2026, in Austria and throughout the European Union, it's officially prohibited to ask questions about salary level at a previous place of work during job interviews. That is, an employer no longer has the right to ask how much you earned before. Why is this important?
so that companies don't have the ability to artificially lower your base rate at a new position based on your previous salary. This directive was adopted by the European Union back in 2023, but member countries, including Austria, had exactly 3 years to transfer these rules into their national laws. The official and final deadline for this law to come into force in Austria is precisely June 7, 2026. Why is this critically important for migrants? The Austrian Chamber of Labor notes that this law is aimed at protecting the most vulnerable groups in the labor market, among which foreigners occupy first place. Previously, employers often took advantage of the fact that migrants agreed to low pay because they needed to find any job, and later, when moving to other companies, they were again offered less money based on their previous experience. Now this practice will be completely eliminated. What to do at a job interview after June 7th? If you're asked about your previous salary, you have the legal right to refuse to answer this question. Also, the company is obliged to indicate in the job vacancy announcement the minimum salary level or range. If you see an announcement without salary after June 7th, this is already a violation, and you can complain to the Chamber of Labor, Arbeiterkammer. So remember, your previous salary is now your private matter, which you're not obliged to share.
And one more important news item. The European police, Europol, issued a warning about the activation of so-called highway scammers, Autobahnbetrüger, on the eve of the summer vacation season. Criminals usually operate according to the following scheme. A car with hazard lights is standing on the highway shoulder. The scammers, often decent-looking, with women or children in the car to inspire more trust, wave their hands and beg for help. They tell a story that they've run out of fuel, the car broke down, or wallets were stolen, and they urgently need to get to a hospital or airport. Psychological pressure is a key part of the scheme. Then they offer sympathetic drivers to buy their expensive gold jewelry, rings, chains, for a pittance, for example, for 50 or 100 euros to get cash for fuel. In reality, this gold turns out to be cheap metal costume jewelry, or even worse. While one criminal distracts the driver with conversation, others can inconspicuously pull a bag, phone, or wallet from your car's interior. What to do if you see such a situation? First, think before stopping. If you really want to help, call 120, that's EAMTC, or 123, that's Roadside Assistance, ARBE. Or call the police at 133. They'll send professional help. And second, never buy gold or other valuables from strangers on the road. That's all the key updates you need to know. Coming up, news from the capital.
The main event of the week for the capital was the Jubilee's 70th Eurovision Song Contest, which wrapped up on Sunday night at the Wiener Stadthalle Hall. A music celebration indeed took place in the city, but behind the scenes, serious political scandals were brewing. Due to Israel's participation, 5 countries boycotted altogether and refused to send their artists to Vienna, and broadcasters from Spain, Ireland and Slovenia, instead of broadcasting the final, showed films about Palestine on air. Right on the day of the final, a multi-thousand demonstration took place in the city centre, but Vienna police worked professionally. There's no data on casualties or serious clashes. The contest organisers likely breathed a sigh of relief when Bulgaria with singer Dara took first place at the contest, and Israel remained in second place, because their victory through total boycotts and the tense security situation would have put next year's show at risk. As for the Austrian participant, Cosmo took second to last place, earning only 6 points. Despite the tense atmosphere, Vienna businesses earned wonderfully from Eurovision. Official figures on tourists for the entire Eurovision week will be published by Vienna city authorities a bit later, but first assessments in the press are mixed. The Wiener Stadthalle Hall, with 10,000 seats, was full during the final and semi-finals, and hotels in central Vienna received good revenue. However, Austrian media are publishing sociological studies by the company Market Agent, which showed that 62% of Austrians themselves showed absolutely no interest in the contest due to constant scandals and politicization of the show. Cultural historians on newspaper pages warn, due to such tension and major sponsors' refusal to finance the contest, it will become much harder in the future. And immediately after the music contest final, Vienna switched to another event. On May 15th, the famous arts festival Wiener Festwochen kicked off on the square in front of City Hall, Rathausplatz, with a spectacular free concert. Over the next 5 weeks, city residents can expect dozens of theatre performances, music, and much more. A detailed programme of the festival weeks can be found on the website. Now to other notable events in the capital. In the Neubau district, city authorities officially approved a project to create a large memorial in memory of thousands of Roma and Sinti who became victims of the Nazi Holocaust. The monument will be erected in Weghuber Park, which is located directly in front of the Ministry of Justice building. For Austrian society, this is a landmark decision, as previously Vienna didn't have a separate large memorial site dedicated to this tragic page of history. Meanwhile, the season of summer outdoor pools, so-called Freibäder, officially started in Vienna. Due to unusually warm weather in May, city authorities prepared beach areas 2 weeks earlier than usual. Municipal services expect record crowds of Viennese this coming weekend, so at main locations like Schafbergbad, they've increased the number of lifeguards and staff. And finally, a major food scandal that shook Vienna supermarkets this week. In recent months, Austria has been experiencing a serious shortage of its own chicken eggs due to avian flu outbreaks in Europe, so store shelves are often empty and chains are trying to save the situation with imports. Against this background, the Vienna Market Administration just these days intercepted and completely withdrew from circulation a giant batch, over 75,000 smuggled eggs from Ukraine. This entire shipment was without mandatory state stamps and labelling, so the truck was turned back at the border. Consumer protection organisations are confident that these eggs were planned to be packaged as local, because in Vienna stores, mass consumer deception was discovered in parallel. In many supermarkets, boxes with patriotic Austrian drawings stood on shelves, but inside lay cheaper German goods. Farmers' associations have already sounded the alarm and are demanding that the government strengthen control on roads and in trading halls so that illegal imports aren't sold to Austrians under the guise of domestic products. Now let's head beyond the capital and see what's been happening in other federal states. This week wasn't without its share of loud scandals there either, and the main topic currently dominating Austrian media concerns the restaurant business.
Austrian restaurants have introduced a new controversial rule that has seriously angered tourists and locals. Food establishments in the regions have started charging separately for empty clean plates if guests decide to share one portion between two people. A new wave of outrage on social media rose after a scandal in the city of Grieskirchen in Upper Austria. There, one of the pizzerias charged customers €11 simply for bringing an extra plate for a child who wanted to share a large portion of food with parents. Restaurant owners themselves explain such radical measures as an attempt to survive in financial crisis conditions. According to them, when two guests order only one dish and ask for extra dishes, the establishment incurs losses because staff still spends time on service, and the kitchen has to wash extra dishes. However, customers categorically don't accept this logic, calling 11 euros for a piece of china outright extortion. Especially since this isn't the first similar case in Austria. Earlier, a restaurant near Lake Wörthersee also got into a scandal due to the demand to pay 8 euros for each empty plate on the table. Meanwhile, a large-scale accident occurred on a section of the Danube River in the Strudengau region. Petroleum products entered the water. Officials received a report on May 14th from a random witness near the port of the city of Grein in Upper Austria. More than 200 firefighters from the Perg and Amstetten districts neutralized the threat in less than a day using drones and water barriers in the Hirschenau area. The culprit of the pollution is still being sought, as river police checked all vessels in the section but found no traces of leaks or breakdowns. Local ecologists note that mass death of fish or birds was avoided thanks to quick reaction, as booms blocked entrances to protected floodplains and fish farms in time. For residents of riverside cities in Upper and Lower Austria, there's no danger. Monitoring confirmed that drinking water sources are absolutely clean and weren't affected. Water supply in the region is operating normally, and ecologists ask to refrain from bathing in the river only in the area of cleaning work until complete disappearance of film residues. Meanwhile, in Lower Austria on May 15th, a new bike park opened in Puchberg am Schneeberg in Neunkirchen district. This is 12 kilometers of specially equipped trails for mountain bikes of various difficulty levels. This is another wonderful opportunity for the whole family to spend an active weekend outdoors. Prices are affordable. A day ticket costs about 30 euros for adults and 20 euros for children. There are family passes. If you don't have your own bicycle, equipment rental is available on site, including protective helmets and knee pads. In Tyrol, the region hosted one of its flagship journalism events, the Innsbruck Journalism Festival, Journalismusfest Innsbruck. 180 journalists from 23 countries and over 8,000 guests. The festival serves as a key platform for discussing media policy and journalism not only in Austria, but across Europe. This year, the main discussion topics are the role of artificial intelligence in journalism, combating disinformation, and the future of traditional media in the era of social networks. And to conclude, news about Austrian tourism. In the Salzkammergut region, which covers the territories of Salzburg, Upper Austria, and Styria, they launched a new joint tourism initiative called Salzkammergut verbindet. 3 federal states united for joint regional marketing. The goal is to attract more international tourists and reduce dependence on the German market, from where 70% of vacationers currently come. The 3 states allocated €500,000 euros annually for an advertising campaign, and businesses are trying to attract travelers in off-season months so that hotels and restaurants operate without stops. Due to such growth, a staff shortage has emerged in the region. Hotels and tourism services lack workers. For migrants, this is a real chance to find work, as local entrepreneurs are ready to simplify hiring conditions and even provide free housing to fill vacant positions.
And that wraps up today's episode. Thanks for tuning in this week. We'll continue to keep you informed about the most important events. Subscribe to the weekly podcast Rot-Weiss-Rot Report, a podcast for those who live and work in Austria. Find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. That's all for now. Catch you next week.